Yeah. All right. So let's move on to your number 5 pick.
So my number 5 is a Canadian movie called Brother, and it is directed by Clement Virgo. It is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful movie. I've said this about, I think, every movie that I've talked about. But it's about two brothers growing up in Scarborough during the 1990s. And it's told in an interesting timeline. Like it's a bit of a fractured timeline where something tragic has happened amongst the family. So the two brothers plus the mom. And we're kind of told in a non-linear format the two stories as they kind of come together. I think so. This movie is based off of a book by, I hope I say his name right, David Cheriandi, and the book is fantastic as well. I've read the book. It's such an extraordinary story, and the thing that impresses me the most is, like, there are two things about this movie I love. Is Clement Virgo, his ability as a director to organize this movie when the timelines could be very jumbled and it could get either messy and confusing or just kind of played up a bit campy and a bit corny in a way. Like, because if you do it too much, one side, like kind of to distinguish the different timelines, then it can break the feel of the film. But he does it so well that I find it really impressive. And the second thing I love about this movie is Aaron Pierre, who plays Francis, the older brother, who is, I find, just an extraordinary character, an extraordinary character study in the film. And Aaron Pierre is such a force of an actor to be in it. And he, I follow him on Instagram now, and his, I think he posted up something not too long ago about finishing Malcolm X, and I can't wait to watch that. Anything that he's in now, like, I will 100%. Be there opening weekend to watch it, because he's fantastic, and this movie's extraordinary. It's technically a 2022 movie because it came out at TIFF, but in the last few weeks, in March of this year of 2023, there's been some really great Canadian movies coming out, and this was one of them, and it's absolutely fantastic.
Yes, it is a very good movie and one that I like a lot. It's sort of funny where you talked about the movies coming out, Canadian movie coming out now, and it's true where it seems like literally within the last like 2 or 3 weeks, every, we'll call it major Canadian film, as in really well received or has nominations at the Canadian Screen Awards, are just coming into theaters now. So it's kind of crazy that they're all at once now out.
It's really annoying. I won't lie. I find it not. It's not. I should say this is annoying for purely editorial side, because like it's just like an onslaught of Canadian movies, and it would be nice to be able to talk about them like on Exclaim, but give each of them their own time. Whereas this one was like, okay, Brother's out, then I Like Movies is out, and you got Chandler Levac, who's an interesting filmmaker that's coming out, and then Anthony Shin with Rice Boy Sleeps. Ethan Ing with Therapy Dogs. Like, it's just so much because everybody's trying to come out right in time for the CSA eligibility period. Mm-hmm. And I really wish that wasn't the case, because I feel like what will end up happening, and I'm sure like Canadians, it's always tough to get Canadians to go watch Canadian movies.
Yep.
But I think when you have an onslaught of them at the theater, it makes it that much worse. So if you could just give I Like Movies like a couple weeks of just unfettered, this is the Canadian movie that's out, you should go watch it. Then give Brother the next little bit, then give Rice Boy Sleeps the next bit. Wouldn't that be better? Like, wouldn't that be much nicer than rather than them competing against each other? But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a bigger problem to deal with, and hopefully I know Crave has been picking up a lot of them, and hopefully now that some of these movies are easier to watch for people, because it basically used to be like you could see it in theaters for 1 week, or you could pay $20 to rent it on iTunes, and if you don't want to do either of those things, then you're never going to watch this movie. So hopefully now with this streaming sort of being a bit better in Canada with Crave, because it seems like Bell basically is the distributor for all of these movies, it gets a little bit better. But yeah, hopefully people check out Brother.
It's a great movie. Can't wait to see it where it shows up on your list.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's go to my number 5 pick, and that is a movie directed by Greg Mottola called Confess, Fletch. So as I alluded to at the beginning of this episode, there was one movie that did not make my Oscar Best Picture list, and this is that movie. And it sucks because comedy doesn't get its due at the Oscars at the best of times. And so I felt a little guilty, not including this, but this is a phenomenal, absolutely hilarious movie. Probably the funniest movie I've seen in the last maybe 2 to 4 years. It is absolutely incredible. I love John Hamm when he is at his dumbest, to kind of put it nicely. Basically, Fletch, if you probably hear the name and that sort of sounds familiar, he's a character based on some books that was made into a couple movies in the 80s with Chevy Chase playing him, where it was very heavy on the physical comedy and the props and all that sort of stuff, but it's sort of rebooted and more true to the original novels. Basically, the plot of this movie is John Hamm plays a guy named Fletch who used to write about crime for newspapers, and now he doesn't anymore. But he checks into his Airbnb, and when he does, there is a dead body there. And so he calls the police and says, "Hey, there's a dead body in my Airbnb. You guys should come and check this out." At that time, he starts trying to gather his own clues to figure out what's happening. So, of course, when the police arrive and they start asking him questions and he is way too honest, he immediately looks like a suspect. So we spend the entire movie being like, yeah, he's not really the suspect, but, the police really believe it. But as the movie kind of goes on and his stories start to get a little bit jumbled, and you start to wonder if he's a bit of an unreliable narrator. All this with the fact that you've got an excellent foil for him in Roy Wood Jr. as the cop that is on his tail, that doesn't believe him, but still can't help but listen to him. And Kyle MacLachlan as a real estate agent who loves to dance to really hard EDM music, but won't shake hands with people. Our old friend from Mad Men, John Slattery, shows up as well, and we get a couple scenes of John Hamm and John Slattery together, and that's great. And then Marcia Gay Harden, just absolutely chewing on the scenery in the most delicious ways possible in this over-the-top Italian accent that is just, she calls him Flesh. And every time she goes, Flesh, I can't help but laugh. And there's so many quotable lines of this movie that my wife and I still quote them to each other because he rates every Uber ride that he's in. And he just says it out loud. He'll be like, 5 stars, great service. And one time he leaves, he goes, 405 stars, your backseat's dirty. every time there's something, our car's a little messy, we say that to each other. We're like, 4 out of 5 stars, your backseat's dirty. Have you seen this movie?
I haven't even heard of this movie, man.
Oh my
That's
God.
Incredible.
It is so funny, and more people need to watch this. I think I'm looking it up right now. I'm pretty sure it is on Paramount Plus now for streaming. Yeah, it's on Paramount Plus. Or if you've got the Paramount Plus Apple TV thing, it's there as well. Absolutely incredible. So funny.
Yeah, it sounds really fun. I love John Hamm doing comedy. I always think John Hamm's such a funny actor in that it seemed like Hollywood after Mad Men, they just didn't know what to do with the guy. Because he looks like such a police officer, army guy, but actually he's much more interesting in comedy. Like we've seen that in 30 Rock. Like he was really, really fun. And Curb as well, Curb Your Enthusiasm. He's great in that too. Right, Bridesmaids. I always forget he's in that. I always think of Chris O'Dowd. But yeah, John Hamm's in that too. But yeah, he's so funny. He's such a good comedic actor. But woe is him. He's just so handsome that it seems like Hollywood just never likes to put him in that. But when you do put him in that, and it sounds like this movie is a great example of that, it just really works, and he's incredible. And then it makes you be like, why isn't he doing more comedy? So I'm gonna watch that. I'm gonna watch that later. That sounds really fun.
I literally cannot recommend this movie enough to people because it is so good. This movie made nothing at the box office. If I remember correctly, when I watched it, when it came out, it was like just came out to Paramount Plus. I think it made something like $1 million at the box office. Like it is insane how this movie just was an absolute tank. But
No
one knows about it. Like,
I was gonna say,
no one knows about
yeah,
this.
like it just doesn't have any marketing behind it. So
No.
that's probably the biggest problem is that like it's just nobody even knew about it. That's crazy. And it's got big names in it too. Like that's
It really
kind of the funny thing about it. And a big director name too.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a shame because I would love it if this finds such a life on Paramount Plus that they're like, we need a sequel of this. But it will not. It will unfortunately go to the heap of movies that could be great franchises that will never see a second film.
You know, it's like, this is a really tangent point, but like the thing, without having seen this movie, but just judging from how much you love it, the thing that makes me sad about a movie like this is that I doubt it's going to have a physical release, right? Like it most likely won't have physical release. So it's going to live and die on a streaming service. And at some point, like Netflix, Prime, all these streamers have done, which is just take movies off of their service inexplicably. At one point, Paramount Plus is just going to remove it. And then it doesn't sound like it's going to ever come back. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not going to get like some, you know, when Disney does this, we're opening the Disney vaults. Like that's not going to happen with this movie.
Yeah.
And so without a physical release and then without it being on a streaming service or whenever they decide to randomly remove it and very quietly remove it, most likely that movie, it kind of, in a way, it's like, it's almost like it doesn't exist anymore, which is nuts. And then that's why pirating becomes such a thing, because how else do we kind of continue with these movies? But that's besides the point.
Yeah. All right. Let us move on to your number 4 pick, Rachel.
So my number 4 is a movie that I know that you like the performances, but you're not necessarily crazy about the movie. And it is one of the movies that got nominated a shit ton, but didn't win all that much this year. And that is the Banshees of Inisherin. Funny enough, this was a movie that kind of similar to Everything Everywhere All at Once. It was a bit lower on my list. And then I watched it again probably December-ish. I think actually same thing as Everything Everywhere. And then it kind of just shot back up on my list because I realized how much I really loved it. The performances, as I said, like I know you really love them. They're phenomenal. And it's, but the actual story itself is so simple. Like when you describe this movie as it's about 2 grown men who are best friends who live on this remote island, a fictional island off of Ireland, off of the mainland of Ireland. And one of them just decides they just don't want to be friends anymore. And it's a really simple premise, but yet somehow it delivers on a very dark turn of events as well, from Brendan Gleeson's character. But it's also just like there's just such a sadness to it, and that comes from Colin Farrell, of how heartbreaking is it when your best friend, and this is like you're middle-aged, and your best friend just says to you one day, like, you are dull. I do not want to be your friend anymore. Like, you are boring. It's like, I feel like I'm wasting my time being your friend and spending my days talking to you at the pub. Like, that is one of the sharpest and most heartbreaking things I think that can happen to anybody at any age. But for some reason, I think being middle-aged makes it even worse. And the fact that neither of them are married, neither of them have children, like, so really it's their friends that they have at the end of the day. And the one friend he has is like, yeah, no, I'm just not feeling you anymore. I just don't want to be your friend. And it's really simple. But yeah, I think it delivers on such a heartbreaking existential crisis, yet while being kind of funny in a very dark way. Like, I don't think it's like a haha LOL kind of comedy, but it does have its moments of being funny. And yeah, again, I'll say it, the performances across the board, Brendan Gleeson, Kerry Condon, Colin Farrell, Barry Keoghan, they're all amazing. And I think one of the best acted movies I've seen in a very, very long time.
Yeah, I agree with what you said off the top. That's the best way to describe it for me, is one that I absolutely adored the acting performances, all of them, but for a movie that just didn't quite work for me. And it's funny, every time I listen to someone talk about it or someone review it and talk about its themes, I'm like, wow, that's a really interesting movie, and I wish I felt the same way about it, because it's all there, and the themes and the subtext and all that stuff is there, and I appreciate it, but for some reason, the actual movie just did not connect with me.
Kind of like me in The Wonder, I suppose. Like on paper, I can read it and say like, yeah, this is a great movie. Like I get where it's coming from, but just for whatever reason, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, let us move on to my number 4 pick. I don't know what I'm trying to say here.
Fletch.
And yes, Fletch. And that is the little indie movie that could, Top Gun Maverick. Have you heard of this movie, Rachel?
No, what's it about?
Apparently it's a sequel from some 80s movie. Don't really know much about it. But it's about this guy who is aging and, society believes he no longer has use. So he has to, show the younger generation that he can, still do his job as competently as he used to do back in the 80s or whenever it was.
Wow, that sounds interesting. Who
yeah.
did they get to play the main dude?
Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise, yeah.
Like Tom Hanks, but
sort
different.
of, but he's a little bit different.
Okay.
In all seriousness, yeah, this movie just absolutely blew me away. I feel like I've told this story on the podcast before. Had never seen the original Top Gun. The new one had just come out, and I kept hearing good things about it. I was like, cool. I don't care. And my wife and I were sitting...
Cool. I don't care.
My wife and I were sitting next to each other, and we watched the trailer on TV, and she's like, hey, do you have any interest in seeing Top Gun Maverick? I was like, yeah, you know what? Maybe I kind of. Like,
I thought you were going to be like, no, Stephanie, I don't like fun.
I was like, I've never seen the original. Let's watch that one first, and tomorrow let's go see Top Gun Maverick. And she's like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So we watched Top Gun, the first one, and really didn't care for it. So I was like, oh, already bought these tickets. Hopefully I like Top Gun Maverick more. Watched it and absolutely adored it. This movie is incredible. I love the practical effects. Tom Cruise in the last decade has continued to prove that he is still the last movie star standing. And this movie is just incredible. For as much as, you know, it's a fun movie to watch, it's also a great sort of breakdown on where the movie industry is at in terms of doing things practically versus doing things CGI, computer generated. And there's a great analogy between that. And the supporting cast is all excellent. And there's a really sad and tearful scene with Val Kilmer in it that makes you cry.
This movie is 100%. It's the cinematic event, right? Like it's the movie that I think in years to come, when we look back at 2022 as like just as a film year, I do think this is the one that's going to be remembered the most. Not Everything Everywhere All at Once. Definitely Not All Quiet. Not like those aren't the movies that are going to stand the test of time, in my opinion. But I think Top Gun Maverick is going to be the one that everyone's just gonna like. I think there's such a great story behind it as well, in the sense of this was supposed to come out 2020, I think, and Paramount was really, from what I understand, Paramount was really pushing Tom Cruise to be like, let's put this out on our new streaming service that they wanted to launch, Paramount Plus. This will, like, I think they were going to look at it as the opening film to get people to get news or to get subscribers and all that jazz. And Tom Cruise, being the last actor who could possibly do this, says, no, Paramount, you're not doing that. Like, you're not going to release my movie onto a streaming service. And thank God he did that, because this is one of those few movies, like, I shouldn't say few movies, because I do think every movie kind of has a reason that you can go out to the cinema and you can enjoy it. But that movie in particular, to watch it in a theater with the biggest screen you possibly can watch it on, the best sound system that you can watch, that you can hear it on, and then with a crowd as well. Like this kind of ticks every single box in terms of the best cinematic experience that there is. And most people that I know, or not, I shouldn't say most, but a lot of people I know that watch this, they came away being like, this is the best movie of the year. Like, it's just the best movie of the year. It's the one that is the most enjoyable. But it's not just, I won't even kind of denigrate it by saying it's just a popcorn movie, because it's not. Like, they're like you said, the Val Kilmer scene and It's and the filmmaking aspects behind it. It's an incredible movie. It didn't make my top 10, but it's an incredible movie. I haven't seen the first one since I was a kid, so I don't actually remember it. I remember enjoying it, but from what I gather, everyone who rewatches it is like, it is not nearly as good as we all remembered it to be. And I'm like, oh, okay, so I just haven't gone back to watch it. But it's incredible. And, you know, it's Tom Cruise doing his thing. The man's nuts. Like him and Chris Nolan, I don't know how they haven't done a movie together yet, because they're both crazy. They both do like the most batshit stuff in movies, and they should definitely come together and do one together, because that would be fun.
Based on Tom Cruise's movie picks lately, I think his ego would prevent him from working with Christopher Nolan.
You think so?
And Christopher Nolan's ego would prevent him from working with Tom Cruise.
That's interesting. I would think that they would love it. I just think like, because they're both on the same level of, this is what we could do in a movie.
They both want final say of how things are done. And so if you look at Cruise's directors over the last decade, he's basically been the director in all but name.
That's true.
And that includes Joseph Kosinski, who made a very good Tron Legacy movie. But like, we know that, you know, auteur theory is basically a long debunked theory. But you know, Tom Cruise makes a real good run at auteur theory still being a thing, at least in some cases. And same for Christopher Nolan.
Fair. That's a good point. You've brought it up before, actually, where it's like him, Kosinski, Christopher McQuarrie, who are pretty much the two directors Cruise has worked with almost exclusively in the last few years. They are two directors who are very much so willing to just be Tom Cruise's like henchmen, basically. And like,
just say that they're not talented, but capable,
absolutely,
and things like that. But yeah, they're very much his yes men, henchmen sort of thing, where Tom says we do this, so we do this.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, isn't it nuts? Tom Cruise has Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks, have they done a movie together? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Which is kind of nuts.
The two of them
That's
together.
Kind of nuts to think, like, because they came up around the exact same time. Like they must be in and around the same age, and they've both been.
Yeah, but they're so
like
different.
They're so different. Like they're such different actors, and they've had such different careers. But it's kind of surprising that they haven't done anything together. I don't even know if I've ever seen a picture with the two of them together.
Yeah.
How funny.
Who knows? Yeah. All right, let's move on to your number 3 pick, Rachel.
Oh, I was about to Google Tom Hanks and Tom Cruise picture together. Want to see if I could find it. I'm like, oh no, it's my turn again. My number 3 is a Greek movie called Apples. It is technically a 2020 movie, but I'm counting it as 2022 because Canada didn't get it till 2022. It is a movie about an epidemic that occurs that is not, we don't know how far reaching this virus or this affliction has spread, but effectively it is, everybody's getting amnesia. Everybody's waking up one day and just having memory loss, and it takes place in Athens. But again, there's no way of knowing whether or not it's just Athens, Greece, the world, like nobody knows. But what you do know is that it is common enough, that this amnesia is common enough that hospitals have begun to create programs to help people not even try to regain their own personal memories back, but just to regain a sense of how to live properly again, how to get on in society again. They don't even try to bother finding your family members. Like you can either be like, family members are looking for you, but for a lot of people, no one's looking for you because either there's no one to look for you, or those family members have lost their memory as well, and they don't know who's missing or what's missing. So anyways, that's the premise. And it's about this one man, Aris, who's basically going through the program. We meet him at the very beginning when he has lost his memory. He's in the hospital. Nobody's claiming him. And he is going through the different steps of the program, which include, taking a picture of, going to a movie and taking a picture of it. And I think he goes to watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Going to like a nightclub, going to do like these random things, like meeting a girl and sleeping with her and that kind of thing. It's just an incredibly touching movie, and at the end, it's a bit of an ambiguous ending that leaves you to wonder what, like, everything that you just saw, was that real? Was that fake? Who knows? Not like, is it a dream? It's not like a bullshit thing like that. But it was just a really, really interesting movie to me that completely stuck with me. I watched it in, I want to say maybe August of last year. I haven't stopped thinking about it. I just think it's such an incredible movie, and the performances are great, but there's such the technical filmmaking aspect of how you build a story and how you build a world without any exposition is phenomenal. And I think that on that level, that this movie is really interesting to watch, but it's just a really fascinating plot as well. And it is in Greek. So yeah, you have to read subtitles, but for people who, if you can find it, I would 100% recommend to watch this one.
Well, this is a movie that was not on my radar before, but sounds very interesting to me. That said, I do want to circle back to your Tom Hanks and Tom Cruise photo thing. And the answer is there is 2 photos of them together. One from 1994 where there was a Vanity Fair cover with Cruise, Hanks, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, where they were dubbed the 3 Kings of Hollywood, with Tom Cruise very clearly standing on an apple box because he is almost the same height as Arnold and Tom, who are both very tall. And then there's the other 2003 legendary Vanity Fair cover where it features Tom Hanks, Tom Cruise, Harrison Ford, Jack Nicholson, Brad Pitt, Edward Norton, Jude Law, Samuel L. Jackson, Don Cheadle, Hugh Grant, Dennis Quaid, Ewan McGregor, and Matt Damon, all in one picture.
So, okay, I'm looking at these pictures now. Number 1, the picture with Cruise, Schwarzenegger, and Tom Hanks. Hilarious, because Tom Cruise is in that era where he's got like his longer hair, and his goatee. Yeah, and him and Arnold look really like very Hollywoody, and then Tom Hanks is just kind of like the cute little boy. It's just like, hello, I'm here too. I love that. The other photo shoot you're talking about was just like all those leading men from the 90s. Like, that's incredible. But I'm actually scrolling through. There is a picture of them. I believe that is Princess Diana's funeral. I kind of
interesting.
believe that they both attended that. I think that's where this picture is from. I do wonder, after I said, like, why haven't they worked together? And like, obviously they know each other. Like, I don't think that they could have gone this long without having met and at least knowing each other casually. But I wonder if Tom Hanks, being the good guy that he is, he's just like, steer clear of Tom Cruise. Because Tom Cruise, as much as we love him, he gets a massive pass from us. From everybody, inexplicably so, just because he makes us, like, because he runs a lot and we get very entertained by him, but he is like a shady man, and I think we all know that. But I wonder if Tom Hanks, just being like the good clean cut guy, he's just like, I just avoid Tom Cruise, like I don't associate with him. I wonder.
I think on a even simpler level is both of them are kind of, I'm the number 1 in the movie, and Tom Cruise has a couple times been involved in an ensemble. I'm thinking of like Magnolia and Tropic Thunder, but for the most part, you know, you rarely see 2 number 1 stars in the same movie.
Around the same age as well. Like, that's actually, who was I watching on? Graham Norton. They were talking, because I think they were talking about like 2 actors, like, oh, you've never worked with him. And it's like, you very rarely work with people who are your age, especially if it's like 2 men, 2 women, because they just kind of don't make space for that. But they do seem friendly at, I believe this is Princess Diana's funeral, and Steven Spielberg's in the background.
I see the same picture you're talking about. Yeah.
With Nicole.
Let's get back on topic here. We'll go to my number 3 movie, and I think this is one that's really going to shock a lot of people, and that is Tobias Lindholm's The Good Nurse. So this is going to be the 3rd time now that going to be ripping Netflix for not appropriately promoting a film. And I know, based on your reaction there, you are not a fan of it. But it's basically more or less where Jessica Chastain and Eddie Redmayne are both nurses at the same hospital. And then it sort of comes to light that Eddie Redmayne has probably killed a patient that is there. And it seems to be happening somewhat frequently at this hospital. And the police get involved. And Jessica Chastain learns through doing her own sort of research that he's probably done this at other hospitals as well. And then at the end of the film, we learn that he has probably killed well over 100 patients. But that's not really the point. The point of it is more about the journey that these characters go through. And I know a lot of people don't like it specifically because of Eddie Redmayne's performance, especially the very end after he gets arrested. And you know what? All I can kind of say is fine. Like, I don't think it was the greatest performance by him, but it didn't bother me in the sense that it bothered a lot of other people. I just mostly really liked the slow, deliberate pacing that this movie took us through, where there was a lot of steady, unbroken shots of things like hallways, and where you're just sort of reminiscing on the information that you've been given and giving time to digest it all.
So my reaction to it was probably a bit extreme. I just don't really like this movie. But it's so funny. Like, I remember coming out of this movie and I thought, this is another one that I saw at TIFF. And I completely agree with you. Netflix, I don't know what the point of buying up all these movies are when you're not even going to promote them. But I remember coming out of it and thinking, this movie is really boring for what it is. Like, it's such a fascinating, true story. Like, it's actually based on actual events, and it's terrifying to think that this was a real thing. Eddie Redmayne, his performance, it doesn't bother me that much. Like that one specific scene you're talking about, that doesn't bother me either. I was just a bit torn. I came out and I was just like, okay, that's an interesting story, but it's just kind of boring. And then I thought about it a little more, and I thought, like, I suppose the fact that it is so boring, the fact that it is so slow burn is kind of the point, because it is such a dull crime that was committed. I shouldn't say the crime itself is not dull, because it's murder, but it's the way that he did it is so boring. Like, it's just such a boring way to kill somebody, which I know makes me sound like a psychopath, but I think that's the point of the movie, is that, like, it's supposed to show just how mundane this act was. Like, he wasn't going out and doing this really flashy kind of killing, which I think is probably true of many serial killers out there, which is just, it's not usually flashy because that's how you can get away with killing so many people. So in that sense, I think I do reassess it in my brain a little bit, in that the whole point of the movie is that it is meant to be dull. It is meant to be a very steady one note in a way. It's just, again, another one of those movies that just didn't connect with me. It's just one that I was like, yeah, it's good. I did look up the story afterwards, which I always think is probably a good sign when you come out of a movie and you go, oh, I want to, like, read more about what actually happened. But maybe similar to the Elvis movie, I kind of took the actual story or the actual people behind it, and I found that much more fascinating than the actual movie. Although the movie ended up being a conduit for it. So yeah, I got another Elvis reference in there. So that's good.
I'm going to give a shout out to a supporting performance by, I'm definitely going to butcher his name, in Mandy Asamuga, who plays the lead detective, Danny Baldwin, investigating. He almost made my best supporting actor list. I at the last moment had to remove him, so he was probably my number 6 pick. Excellent turn by him. But yeah, I really like the sort of the sort of dullness and blandness of the way he committed his crimes. Sort of reflects the bureaucracy of hospitals that have been increasingly corporatized in the United States, and that is how he was able to get away with all of his crimes, is that they were willing to hide his murders in order to protect their own interests.
There's that scene in the movie when Jessica Chastain is leaving a hospital and she's the patient. And she checks in the nurse, and then the nurse, like, hands her. And it's so funny watching the movie. Was like, I had a split second of like, what is she doing? Like, why does she have to check out of a like? I don't know what. Like, I just had a bit of a mind gap, I suppose. Where I was like, why is she checking out of a hospital? That's weird. Like, you just usually just leave. Like, after the doctor tells you whatever, you can just typically go. And then she has to bring out a wallet. And I'm like, oh, yeah, right. I forget that in America and hopefully never in Canada, but like in America, when you leave a hospital, it's not just leaving, like, you have a massive bill. And that the movie did a good job in that too, of like just kind of piercing a a hole, but I mean, it's a hole that everybody is very aware of how ridiculous the medical industry is down there.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. We're at an hour and a half mark. Let's go to your number 2 pick.
My number 2 is After Yang, which is a movie that I saw during Sundance last year. It is a Kogonada movie, who directed Columbus. I love this movie. It's a science fiction movie, which is probably my favorite genre of film. It stars Colin Farrell, has Jodie Turner-Smith, Justin Min. It's set in the not too distant future. They don't really say when, but it's about a robot essentially that the family has adopted to help their adopted Chinese daughter kind of feel more comfortable and also understand her culture a little bit more. So Colin Farrell's character always says like he's delivering Chinese fun facts, which made me laugh every time he said that.
I like that.
Yeah, it was really good. It's just such a beautiful movie. Kogonada is such an underrated director. Like everybody, if you watch his movies, you love it, and you want to be like, I want to watch more of this guy. But he's such a serene way of building movies and building a world. After Yang is oddly a movie that I think kind of did fly under the radar again last year. Not a Netflix movie, so I can't blame Netflix for this one. But it is A24 though, and A24 sometimes drops the ball too. But there's just something about this movie that I was very touched by. And, I suppose maybe there's a bit of a theme in my movies that I love, which it's just a really comfortable world to live in. And After Yang is one of those where I just think like the details that are put into the world building are extraordinary. And the performances are great. I think Jodie Turner-Smith is one of those actresses who you might not know who she is by name, but if you saw her, you'd be like, oh, her. Like, and she's so good in everything. Like, she is the one thing that I loved about that White Noise movie that came out at the end of last year. And her and Colin Farrell together have such a beautiful chemistry. But it's such a gorgeous, gorgeous movie, and it's probably one of my favorite sci-fi movies. Like, it's sci-fi in not it's science fiction without being too science fiction, if that makes sense. Like, there are science fiction elements, and I understand why it falls under that category. But it's just like a really lovely film about memories and what do we choose to keep as what do we choose to keep and retain in our minds as things that we want to remember and be remembered for when we're gone. So yeah, it's a great movie.
Yeah, it is. It is a very excellent one. Kogonada is sort of the antithesis of intensity or over dramatizing something. He is very much a very slow and methodical thinker and filmmaker, and his movies are incredible. And yeah, I'm glad this one made your list. It is an excellent movie.
Did this not make your list? I'm actually realizing.
It did not make my top 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
You and I did not have very much overlap in our top 10s, I'm realizing.
No, not on our final 10.
Yeah.
No. But let's move on. Now we've got our last voicemail of the show, and it is from friend Bill Antoniou, who hosts Bad Gay Movies. Bill is a very lovely friend, and I only ever have nice things to say about him. So I'm so happy that he participated in this and was willing to send in his clip for his favorite movie of the year, because Bill has great taste in movies.
Hello, Dakota and Rachel. This is Bill Antoniou of the Bad Gay Movies podcast. Thank you both for having me on to do this again. I assume that when Dakota introduces me, he's going to talk about what a mean old man I am. And to that, I ask him to explain his pronunciation of the name Navalny. Okay, moving on. My favorite movie of 2022, and the only movie I was excited about last year, was Tar by Todd Field. Our excessive connectivity with each other, shall I say, has encouraged us all to whittle down our perceptions of other people's personalities to very simple terms. A person now is either good or bad and nothing in between. And this film does a beautiful job of creating a much more complex environment and a much more complex character. Lydia Tarr is inspired. She's disciplined, brilliant. She's also arrogant, indulgent, and short-sighted. And people are really shitty to her in their enthusiasm to tear her down, but she's pretty shitty to other people as well. And in this incredibly effortless way, this film shows us that a person's up and down trajectory with success is not the result of specific people's opinions or actions, but an inevitable organic social evolution. And that's that. Thank you very much again, and talk to you later.
All right, so like Bill has his number one movie, my number two movie is the Todd Field directed Tar, starring Cate Blanchett. And he so elegantly talked about what makes this movie great as far as the grayness of the Lydia Tar character in the world she lives in, and she's good, she's bad, she's a mix of everything, she's complicated, she's a genius, all this sort of stuff. I absolutely adored this movie and all of its performances from Blanchett, from Nomi Merlant, from Nina Hoss, and so on and so on. This movie is just absolutely incredible, and I loved it. And I know you did not like it at all.
I didn't. I really didn't.
So it's just sort of proof that I've got superior taste in movies.
It's hard to argue with Bill. I think Bill, I generally trust his movie tastes in Bill, but yeah, on Tar, I don't know what it is. Tar is just, I don't know. I don't get the hype behind this movie. I think Cate Blanchett is great in it. I think she is wonderful, but she is generally wonderful in every single movie that she does. So that for me was not a standout, which is, again, it's not fair to her to say that. Yeah, I just don't really get the hype behind Tar. I don't. I get that it's topical and blah, 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 but yeah, I have nothing of positive things to add to this conversation. So I'm glad it's your number two, and I'm glad it's Bill's number one. I'm glad that it's like, it seems to have touched a lot of people. I will say, I have a positive thing. Okay, my positive thing about the Tar movie is there's a really funny Twitter account that came out of this, which was Lydia Tar. That was a great account. I really enjoyed watching whoever was doing it. I really enjoyed all the tweets that had come out from the last, 3, 4, 5 months, something like that. It's good stuff. That's my positive intake on Tar.
Fine. Yeah, whatever. I just loved the genre playing and how this was a borderline horror movie as a psychological drama, revealing the depths of the complications of this character. And I don't know, it's weird how some points you're sort of rooting for her and other times you're like, no, this woman is completely awful and needs to be removed from her position of authority and influence right away. And I like that you can feel multiple things about a character and about a movie all at once, and how when it ends you sort of have to look at and be like, was she punished or was she not punished for her actions that preceded? And I really like that you're left feeling complicated and confused and kind of gross at the end of it.
You know how you said when people describe Banshees to you and you go, wow, that's such a great movie, but you just did not get any of those things. That's the exact same thing. When you're like, oh, I love that you feel this now. I'm like, I also felt entirely indifferent to the entire movie. Really couldn't give two shits what was going on with Lydia Tar. But
fair enough.
I do think it was funny that some people thought that she was real. Like that this was like a biopic and like she was a real composer. And so a lot of people like went to look up who is Lydia Tar, which I thought was very funny.
Yeah. All right. What was your number one movie, Rachel?
My number one movie, All Quiet on the Western Front. For all the reasons you said, this to me is just, I was left watching it sounds so lame to say this, but it's like, I literally was left breathless after watching this movie. I remember just watching it in a theater, which I think is such a shame that it didn't, and I'm going to shit on Netflix again. It is such a shame that Netflix didn't give this more of a theatrical release, because it is an incredible movie to see in a theater and with a room full of people, because it's so intense. And, you know, one comment you made when you were talking about this movie about how there are some people saying like, this is like, what kind of a war movie is this? Like, this is not the other, you know, and I think the reason, and not to call those people stupid, but it's just to say that that's kind of the point, is a lot of war movies, they glamorize war. They have there's winners and there's losers. And like that's the way that we have seen war movies play out. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's Hollywood doing them. And let's face it, any of these types of movies, and like Top Gun is another example of this, it's like, it is propaganda. It is like, it does promote a certain country's view, or a country's position in the world when it comes to their army and their military and things like that. And so when you say that, like the movie, or not you, but when somebody says, hey, what kind of a war movie is this? Like, that's the whole point, is that this movie showed there's no such thing as a winner or a loser in when it comes to war. And especially when it came to something as unprecedented and as tragic as World War I was. And the fact that, you know, he is the main character, Paul, who's played by a brilliant Felix Kammer. When he decides to join, he not only goes behind his parents' back to do it, he's convinced by his school friends to do this. And like, they're so excited. Like the opening bits when they show them just so like giddy at the chance of going to war. And like, it sounds like such fun and games to them. And then when the reality actually sets in, and the one friend that convinced him to go is like apologizing to him in the trenches for being like, I'm so sorry. I convinced you to come. I'm so sorry. I made you do this. There's just so many levels on this movie. Like, emotionally speaking, it's tragic. And it's kind of disturbing for people to look at this kind of a movie and be like, what kind of a war movie is this? But then also on a pure filmmaking side, it's incredible. Like I know to some people, the production design is it's just trenches. You know, some people think that, and I don't know what their problem is.
Some people think that.
Yeah, I don't understand. You know, those people have opinions, sure, about film, but they're probably not great opinions. But it's just like such a well done movie on all fronts. Like, all fronts, get it, because it's Western Front. But it is like, it's just an incredible feat of filmmaking, in my opinion. And very rarely have I watched a movie and then at the very end sat back and been like, what the fuck? Like, this was an incredible film. And I haven't seen it since. Like I said, I watched Babylon 3 times. I've seen many movies. I rewatch a lot of movies a lot. All Quiet is not a movie that I've ever wanted to watch again, because it is so intense, and it's so sad. It's so heartbreaking in many different ways. But it's an incredible movie. And it's the one that had the biggest impact on me, going to watch a movie all year. And there was a scene, I don't think I've ever said this on podcast. I'm pretty sure I've probably said it to you. But there's a scene when, the other side, the Allies, come out with flamethrowers. They come out of the thing and they literally have these like flamethrowers, and they're burning people. And when that happens, they come out of the tank with those flaming gun thingies. There was an older woman who was sitting next to me when we were watching it at TIFF, and she was just like, oh dear. And I was like, I know. I was just like looking at her, I'm like, I know. And I think I actually audibly gasped when that happened. I was just like, holy shit, like what the hell is going on? But yeah, it's an incredible war movie. And for my money, I think it is my favorite war movie. And it's hard to say because it's obviously very recent. But yeah, for a long time, Saving Private Ryan was my favorite war movie. But this one, to me, like, with the exception of that opening scene on Normandy, this to me just blows it out of the water, because I think it's just an incredible, incredible movie.
Yeah, it is absolutely incredible. And, you know, it already appeared on my list. So, we're both in agreement that this is an incredible movie that we both love a lot. So yeah, I am going to go over to my number one movie, and you sort of alluded to it, and I tried to be coy, but I can be coy no more, and that is Clement Virgo's Brother. And this is just an absolute masterclass in everything filmmaking. And I know Canadian film has this bad reputation of we don't make good movies, and it's a damn shame. It mostly has to do with the lack of accessibility, marketing, things like that, because this movie is everything you could hope for in a movie. It's exciting, it's thrilling, it's sad, it's heartbreaking, it's touching, it lifts you up, all this sort of things that you can feel about a movie. It has. And it features some absolutely incredible performances. You already touched on Aaron Pierre, who I agree probably gave the performance of the year in my estimation, as the older brother Francis. But the movie sort of takes place in three timelines. We didn't really talk too much about the plot when you were talking about it, but basically it's these two young brothers growing up with a single mom in Scarborough, Ontario, just outside of part of Toronto. And then, so we get to sort of see what they're like when they're young boys. And then there's the second part when they are late teenagers. So Francis is just finishing high school, or rather dropping out of high school. And then Lamar Johnson, who plays the younger Michael, is new to high school, and sort of what life is like for teenage boys and dealing with toxic masculinity and being black in the 90s and going home to a single mom who has to work a lot, and how you need to provide for your family as a child, all this sort of stuff. And then there's the third section, which is, it's not really a spoiler because the movie kind of lets you know right away that Francis does indeed die. We don't know why right away, but it is the later years as Michael is now in his 20s, still living at home with his mom, and just sort of dealing with the post-Francis world that the two of them have to live in, despite the fact that Francis's spirit sort of haunts the both of them. Not literally, but metaphysically, he haunts their lives. He is a ghost of their lives. It is stunning. It features incredible sound design work, towering performances all around, and just absolutely deft filmmaking by Clement Virgo, and easily the best film of the year for me, the best Canadian film of the year for me, and an all-timer overall.
I think I wrote this in our Oscar post, but I think I wrote, like, I figured you would like it. I remember watching it, and during TIFF, I was kind of keeping you up to date on, like, these are the movies that I thought were good, and, like, ones that I really, really loved. And Brother was one that I think I told you I liked it. And I remember thinking, Dakota will like this one. I never in a million years thought that you would love it as much as you do. And I'm really happy that you do, obviously. But yeah, I completely agree with you. It's such a beautiful movie. And I love that, I said it just before, I think we talked about either our number ones or number twos, but, how we didn't have too much overlap on our top tens, but both of our number ones did show up on other parts of our lists. And relatively high up as well, like pretty high up on our list. So yeah, Brothers, it's an incredible movie. I watched that one twice during TIFF, actually. Like, I made time to go watch it a second time because Clement Virgo was going to be at one of the screening, or I think he went to all the screenings, but he did a Q&A, and yeah, it was. It's a beautiful, beautiful movie, and like I already said it, but like I'm so impressed the way that he was able to organize the different timelines, because that's so difficult to me. But the way that they did it was so subtle and yet really, really effective and really organized. I was like organized again. I like organization, and Clement Virgo is a very organized man. Yeah, it's an incredible movie.
I would sort of say this. If you were a fan of Moonlight, which sort of implied a similar tactic of using a triptych to explore a young man's life, you would enjoy Brother, because there's quite a lot of similar themes. It sort of takes place in a similar era, dealing with sort of the Black experience and what it means to be a man and masculinity and all those sort of confusing questions that come along with that. Very similar. The only difference is this one takes place in Toronto and Moonlight is about Miami, which both cities play a very important role in the framing of the story as well. And I too, at my screening, I saw it during the Vancouver Film Festival, Clement Virgo and the writer of the source material, David Charandi, were present, and they did a Q&A as well, which was really cool.
Also, great soundtrack. Brother has an amazing soundtrack. Great soundtrack.
Using that like late 90s hip hop as the soundtrack, excellent.
And the Nina Simone song was it No, I always butcher it, No Me Quitte Pas? No Me Quitte Pas? It's incredible. Like I've heard that song in many, many movies, but the way that they use it in Brother is spectacular. Yeah. And we talked about Aaron Pierre. I also just want to say Stephanie Marsha Blake, who plays the mom, she's incredible. She's so good in this movie as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everyone is excellent in this. All right, so those are our top 10 movies of the year. Obviously, we could talk about movies all day, but do you have a quick few honorable mentions you want to just run through real quickly here?
I do. I'll start with The Batman for all the reasons you already said. This made my 10 for a really long time and then kind of got shuffled around. I love The Batman. I love Batman as a character, and I was really, really happy with this movie, and I'm glad that they're going to continue on with it. Given all the shakeup over that's happening at DC. So there's that one. There was a documentary called Blue Island, which is about the shape-shifting of Hong Kong, and particularly it came out of the protests that happened a few years ago in Hong Kong, and just the change that's going on in generationally speaking since 1997, and beyond that as well. And it was it's a very touching documentary. I think it's done really, really well. And I think it does a superb job of conveying the different faces that, I want to say, like the country, the city, the territory, whatever you want to call Hong Kong, the many, many different faces that it's had over its history. So it's definitely one to check out if you are, or if your family is from Hong Kong. But even for people who aren't, it's very informative and a very well done doc. And the third honorable mention I have is a Japanese movie called Ribbon. And it is by a director named Non, N-O-N, who also wrote it and who also starred in it. And it's a pandemic movie. I saw it during the Toronto Japanese Film Festival last year. And I just really loved it. It's just about like a girl who takes place in 2020, like when everything is getting shut down. And she's an art student and who's just about to graduate. And it just basically talks about like how, in a way, I think there was enough maybe time between the lockdowns and all that stuff to that moment when I watched it that it felt kind of funny. Like she actually figured out a way of showing the humor and the ridiculousness of what was going on at that time, but also how sad it was for that generation. Like, you know, Dakota and I, we're a little older and we're not students. Like we weren't students when this happened. But when all that stuff happened, I always felt really bad for university college students in particular, because those are such crappy years to lose. And I think this movie just does a brilliant job of showing what that generation was going through. And to my understanding, I didn't know who Non was before, but to my understanding, she is quite a prominent person in the Japanese film industry, and in terms of being like a new star. And so she ended up getting a lot of well-known Japanese actors to be in her movie, and which is, I think, is a really big vote of confidence for her. So I don't know how anybody can watch Ribbon in Canada, but if you come across it somehow, it's a really sweet movie.
Very nice. Okay. I've got my next 5. I'll go through them very quickly. Movies that made your list include Everything Everywhere All at Once at number 6, The Menu, which was your number 9, and After Yang, which was your number 2. I also want to highlight Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. I really had a lot of fun with that one. And Women Talking as well. A movie I know you didn't care for, but one that I really did.
I don't even want to talk about Women Talking.
Yeah.
But Bodies, 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 great shout. I love that movie. The ending, I thought, was one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. Like, it's so stupid.
It is.
It's so dumb.
The final reveal is great,
but it works, and I love it. That was a great movie. And they have a really funny back and forth about podcasting there too, which is very funny.
Felt a little called out with that as well.
Yeah.
First of all, a podcast takes a lot of work, okay? You have to organize the guests, you have to do a Google Calendar, and then you build a following. It takes a long fucking time, and I've been working on it for a while.
It's a good movie, though.
Which is why I don't ask any of my friends to ever listen to this show, and I'm always surprised when someone I personally know listens to it.
I have the same thing. I have a friend of mine, Jeff. Hey, Jeff, if you're listening, which I think you are. So he'll message me every now and then about something, and I'm always like, oh yeah, people like listen to this. Like people I know, like who know me in real life and who have known me for a very long time actually listen to this. And it always surprises me when that happens. Even though Jeff, it very consistently messages me being like, oh, I just listened to the latest episode. And I'm always like, oh shit, you did.
Well, hello, Jeff. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'll highlight my friend Kurt, who I'm always surprised when he tells me he's listened to an episode as well.
Is Kurt his full name or is it short for Curtis?
I believe Curtis is his full legal name.
Yeah, see, I knew, I've been introduced to a Kurt not that long ago. And I was like, is that his full name? Is that just a full name or is it short for something? It's like, no, his name's just Kurt. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Anyways,
how Kurt?
I do. Okay. Thanks. Time to wrap this up.
Yep. This wraps up the 8th season of this show. I want to thank everyone that has been a guest on this season, including Bill Antoniou, Callum McNabb, Paulo Bautista, and Jeff Ballmer, who are all featured on this episode, along with other friends, Brody Cottenham, Alex Watson, Todd Pengelly, Thomas Stoneham Judge, Matthew Simpson, Nathan Sizemore, Sammy Felchenfeld, Stephanie Pryor, Alicia Mogul, Rose Ho, Pierre Frigon, Kyle Garzon, John Richards, and more. We will be off for a couple of weeks, but we will be back with more great contrazoompod content. Rachel, thank you so much for another great season. What have you been working on and where can people find you?
You can go to rachelcage.com and on Twitter it is _RachelCage as it is on Instagram. I don't even know what I got going on. I'm sure there's something on Explain that you can go check out. I don't know. But yeah, awesome. This is my second full season doing this with you.
I believe so,
correct? Yeah. Thanks for always having me. It's enjoyable.
Yeah. The show's much better with you on it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too.
Awesome Friday is also much better with you on it. No, I'm not. I love Matthew and Simon, and spoiler alert, you haven't seen this yet, but Simon is going to be a guest on our show coming up.
That's exciting.
Yes, teasing some stuff. But you can also check out our recent If We Were Oscar Voters blog post that we wrote together. And I just published a Best Movies of 2013 list because the way it works is I've been doing this show since 2015. So I'm starting to go back in time of my top 10 from before the show started. I did a 2014 post, I think a year and a half ago, and I finally got around to doing my 2013 list. So I'm going to link to both of those in the show notes. And yeah, this has been a That Shelf podcast. Visit thatshelf.com for more great film discourse. Follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at contrazoompod. What was your favorite movie of the last year? Send an email to contrazoompod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. And if you really like the show, consider tipping us on coffee. Thanks for checking us out.